Obsession is easily the best movie to come out this year. The film has so much to unpack, and it's a beautifully disturbing watch from beginning to end. However, I think that the soundtrack plays a large part in the discomfort the film creates so well, and I don't see it being talked about enough online. Rock Burwell absolutely crushed this one, and I'd be remiss if I didn't add my 2 cents to the conversation. Stick with me, and by the end of this video, I'm going to show you what I think the Obsession soundtrack would sound like from Nikki's perspective. From here on, I'm going to be discussing the themes and topics in the movie, so consider this your spoiler warning. Got it? Good.
If you haven't seen the movie yet, please do yourself a favor. It is a deliciously disturbing watch from beginning to end, and you definitely won't regret it. For those who need a refresher, the movie centers on Bear, a meek, lonely guy who struggles to confess his feelings for Nikki, even after she directly confronts him. Frustrated by his own cowardice, he wishes on a seemingly gimmicky toy that he purchased in a crystal shop. The movie isn't subtle about the fact that he is taking away Nikki's autonomy here. In fact, it shows time and time again that even while it was unknowing at first, he will repeatedly choose the selfish option and let her suffer for his fantasy.
I believe that everything heard in this film's score is from Bear's perspective. Once you're done here with this video, I definitely recommend you go check out the video by Henry Loves Music, which I've linked in the description below. His analysis is fantastic, but the biggest takeaway for me is that Bear is represented by the synths throughout this score. With that in mind, I took another listen to the soundtrack, this time looking for Nikki's voice, and I believe I found it.
There are 3 tracks that I would like to focus on here. Can You Sleep With Me, Go Back to Sleep, and Love Is in the Air. All 3 play during scenes in which Nikki's character is just as vital as Bear's. And in these songs, the strings make a very emotional appearance. Everything from happy and in love to horrifying and intense. I plan to use the title track, Obsession, as a base for my composition. The plan is to jump into Reaper and lay down a foundation in the strings representative of Nikki's character. By the time we're done here, we'll see how much is left of her in that foundation, and what the synths have to say for Bear.
Okay, I do think I've got the notes down. I need to dial in my preset here. So I've got the root notes down. Now I think it's time to go in, kind of listen to what's going on. On top of these notes, try and get it feeling that kind of gross, dissonant feeling that something's off. I love it. So let's dial it in. Okay, yeah, so I think what I want to do here is maybe let's throw in one more octave. Then let's have that top melody line actually move around with it. I'm starting to like that a lot. I think we're going to call that for our string section.
With that foundation set, I think just like in the original version of the Obsession track, it's time to bring in our One Wish motif. I plan to use a very similar synth sound for both this motif and Bear's when I introduce him here in a little bit. The reasoning for that being that while in the original score they are separate entities, I believe that they would be perceived by Nikki as about the same. Also, by introducing a subtle aspect of Bear here, in this moment, we can kind of start to foreshadow what's to come next.
Okay, we're going to be working on the One Wish motif. I think that melodically, this is going to be the easiest to figure out. And that just kind of keeps going until it fades off. I was going to say that the hardest part about this was going to be finding a synth that works for it, but while I was waiting for a couple other presets to download, I was able to find Interlaced. I already love Venus Theory's plugins. They all sound great. I was able to come up with this sound, which I really like for this. So, I mean, we're going to throw it into the piano roll, might play around with it just a little bit, and it should be a good time.
Of course, the next step has to be bringing back Nikki in full force. I've decided to use the melody from Can You Sleep With Me to represent her character in the foreground of my piece. With full transparency, while there is a track titled Nikki, I feel like the moment in the film in which it plays is too centered on Bear to really represent her character. That being said, while this is only one melody out of many that could represent her, I do feel like it is the best fit for today's piece. The plan's going to be switch up the strings, replicate that melody, and then maybe start playing around with how we can start drowning out that Nikki character as Bear really kind of comes in and takes over like he does in the film.
So I am going to throw down the MIDI first, just while I've got the notes in my mind, and then we can kind of play around with sounds once I can just hit play and tweak. Okay, so I think that's our basic shape for this melody, but we really need to work on this string sound. So it sounds to me like this motif does just continue to repeat. And while I thought maybe it was changing around a little bit, I think it's just recontextualized by the chords beneath it. So I had the idea, let's add in our chords on those original strings that we had before, but I think at the same time, I want a synthesizer bass. I want us to start kind of introducing Bear before his motif comes in.
With Nikki's motif laid down, and Bear's synths creeping in the background, the last thing left to do is to introduce his motif and wrap this thing up. To represent Bear, I've pulled the melody from both his title track as well as Love Is in the Air. I do believe that this is a more one-to-one representation of the character. However, Love Is in the Air does expand on this melody just a little bit, which I will be using. Of course, we're going to keep him represented by the synths, but I'm sure that we're going to make just a couple changes before the final product.
So definitely going to be kind of like just a mashup of the whole soundtrack kind of put into one piece, but I think that it is going to turn out really well. And then one other thing I should mention is that I do plan to double the synth with the piano for this part at least, just because I think it sounds better. I kind of like the punch of the piano versus just the... So I don't know. I know it's kind of cheating just a little bit, but in the song, it's also the piano that's kind of playing that melody. And while I do know that I've kind of set up our synth to be the bear character, I just think it sounds better this way. So, that being said, we do still have our synth here. Our character is still very much present.
Of course, I've cut quite a bit of footage here, mostly volume automation and MIDI programming, but come on, I gotta save something for the end, right? In just a moment, I'm going to play you the full version of Obsessed. If you've made it this far, I would really appreciate if you would consider subscribing. I do want to build something special here, and as much as I enjoy making this music, it's even better to be able to share it with you. And with that out of the way, let's let the track play.